planning. Then in 23, it dropped to 38,000. Then in 24, it dropped to a little over 11,000. And I think what we're saying is that we got to be somewhere between 238,000 and 11,000. And we're getting rid of these FTEs because whether it's lack of funds, lack of work, it's just where we're at. And so the caveat that I'll put on this is that if the fees don't show up, we're not necessarily going to expense $50,000 in professional services. But if the fees don't show up to that level, the only place that we have to go other than not spend that 50,000, right? So let's say that planning fees number, we only bring in 100, right? That contractor's out. Operationally, that might seem over a 12-month period. Yep, Scott, you can do all the work. You can write all the staff reports. You and Barbara Colton can get out all the land use notices. Theoretically, over a 12-month period, that is possible. But not everything is going to come in consistently in equal amounts over that 12 months, and we've got statutory timeframes. So if the revenue doesn't come in and it gets even deeper than that, right, we're going to be in a position, not only are no contractor involved, but mid-year, I'm going to have to come to the board and say, hey, we are upside down in the planning budget, and we need to send home this half-time FTE, which basically, in my opinion, makes for a completely untenable task, which at that point, like, I don't want to be the planning director. It's like utter failure. But at the same time, right, you have to, even if this, and Ted and I have talked about, can we do an intergovernmental agreement with another agency? Can we contract this out? Even if you do that, you still have to have somebody watching. And I'll just use a brief example of something that I encountered when I first came to work for Curry County in the city of Brookings. It's the Seacrest Phase 3 subdivision. That was contracted out. The city, this was granted its city planning, but I'm still looking at the plat as the county surveyor. They're on the third phase of a subdivision, and they got 26 homes that are about to go in, and the lots are a minimum of $150K a piece, and the developer cannot sell them because the city's contract planner missed it, the city planner missed it, the county surveyor before me missed it, that 6 of the lots in this subdivision have no legal access. So this, we're finally about to get the plat recorded. My point of bringing that up is that's a example of operating blindly, and even if you want to contract everything out, you still have to have an administrative officer to make sure that your contractor is performing, not just from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint, but from an operational standpoint. And I mean, I know you guys some of you here are business people. Like, if you contracted with somebody to do something for your business, you're going to not only look at what they're charging, you're going to look at the performance of the service that they actually provided to you. And besides what we're getting as a county, like, we have a duty to all of the citizens here to do this appropriately, because otherwise, like, we will end up at LUBA, and LUBA is much more expensive than just taking care of this at a local level. So that's kind of my pitch for this. It's super challenging. And I think one thing that would be really smart to do with this, and I don't know if we've done it or not, Keena, if there's an actual contingency out of the general fund, that if I don't think there is a line item for contingency in the planning budget, but basically if these fees don't show up, like, we've got a serious issue. And, our deadline for budget adjustments is June 1. So basically it's like, if we're not on top of this and the revenue is not tracking with the expenditures by the middle of the year, we have to get rid of the admin person, or we have to be like, we're not doing any planning. And
or we have to do a supplemental And make adjustments to the general fund contribution, probably through other departments.
Correct, which is why I'm suggesting maybe, because if those funds are already allocated, because we're talking about appropriation authority and also allocation, if those general funds are already allocated to other appropriation authorities mid-year, because there's so few of them, which is why this is such a grueling process, I don't think the funds will be there. We have to earmark them now in the form of a general fund contingency, whether it's countywide or specific to planning, because if these fees don't come in, like, we don't have a county planning department, and that's fine if that's what you guys want to do. If that's where we're going to go, I guess what I'm saying is, let's just rip that Band-Aid off now. Let me know. Let everybody know, and really, not to segue too much into the county surveyor, because that's a different fund and a different department. But what has been asked of me is to essentially, because I have this unique skill set, to do both. And in terms of having an admin person in either department, right? Because the admin is going to be, I'm going to be 0.5 FTE planning. The admin's going to be 0.5 FTE planning, and the same on the surveyor side. And currently for this fiscal year, and it doesn't even reflect in, and maybe I'm mixing things too much between surveyor and planning, but they tie together, right? We can't have these people. And currently in the surveyor's office, I'm 0.5 FTE surveyor, and currently a quarter, 0.25 planning, just because I got asked to help mid-year. And so, but the admin person this last fiscal year, and it doesn't show up in the current fiscal year budget, the appropriation authority to take the admin person from 0.1 FTE to 1.0 FTE in the surveyor's office, because it was an absolute disaster, doesn't show in the budget. And so I have mentioned it to Keena this morning. I'm like, hey, can we do a budget adjustment? She's like, too late. And because it's misleading to you guys of, like, on the surveyor side, it looks like we're increasing, but the appropriation authority, just the ability to is not increased in this current fiscal year. But it actually has occurred. The general fund transferred in the money, but they just didn't pair it with the spending dollars. Fortunately, it's less than 10%, right, relative to what's predicted. So in terms of, like, working with Keena, audit matters, like, we're all as copacetic there. But my point of bringing that up is that the two are kind of, like, we're in this position where the two kind of have to work together. So before I talk about surveyor, Ted, is there anything I didn't cover appropriately with planning?
I think you got it. Let's move to surveyor.
Okay.
Real quick. Yeah. Dan, you go.
I was just going to ask, so thank you for that. And to your point, so you were saying that even though we budgeted $300,000 for short-term rental, it was like under 100, you said?
So the biggest year, if you look at 23 actuals,
Right.
113,000.
Well, what do you think it'll be for 24?
Oh, for this current fiscal year? Oh, I think I have got the number.
What was it,
It's
80?
like, no.
Was
Well, so
35, right?
how much can I say, Ted?
35, what's the
Okay.
forecast?
All right. So there was a situation, it was prior to